How NeuroTracker works. NeuroTracker is a visual exercise that challenges you to follow multiple objects as they move in 3D space. The task can be summed up in 3 steps: target, track, and identify. Target involves focusing on the highlighted spheres. Track involves recalling these targets as they move among the decoys. Identify involves selecting these targets once they stop moving. Depending on your responses, the system automatically adapts the difficulty to consistently push your mind to the limit. Each exercise takes 6 minutes, with benefits to attention, focus, and awareness that are often experienced in just a couple weeks of training. To learn how NeuroTracker accomplishes this, watch our next video, NeuroTracker Under the Hood. NeuroTracker Under the Hood. NeuroTracker is a simple but highly effective mental training tool. The efficacy is rooted in 5 key principles. Number 1, 3D training. 3D involves higher order visual processes and is known to provide a clear training advantage for greater benefits. Number 2, multiple object tracking. Distributing your attention activates more mental resources in your brain and is critical for real-world performance. Number 3, wide field of view. NeuroTracker engages your peripheral field of view, stimulating larger neural networks in the brain's visual centers. Number 4, speed thresholds. NeuroTracker automatically adjusts the exercise speed to put you in your optimal concentration zone, pushing you to improve your attention. Number 5, visual pivot. NeuroTracker uses an anchor point to keep your gaze centered to teach you to expand your visual focus and improve your situational awareness. It is the combination of these 5 principles that allow NeuroTracker to boost your high-level cognitive functions for better, real-world performance. A central aspect of NeuroTracker is that training occurs in 3D. There are 3 key benefits to training in 3D. Real-world applications. 3D sight uses higher-order visual processes which are critical in real-world scenarios such as driving a car, playing sports, or even walking through a crowd. These actions all involve processing depth cues in stereo 3D and benefit from NeuroTracker training. Counter excessive screen time. In the digital age, we spend much of our time looking at 2D screens like TVs, phones, or computer displays, which means we often don't get enough 3D stimulation. This is a problem when it comes to the brain's neuroplasticity, which has a use-it-or-lose-it approach. NeuroTracker is a way to boost deficits in our capacity to process 3D information. Performance transfer. Because processing 3D requires a lot of neural firepower, it elicits high-level cognitive functions that integrate broader mental abilities like attention, situational awareness, and decision-making. This makes it an important ingredient in NeuroTracker's ability to transfer training benefits to a broad range of performance benefits. In summary, there are 3 key benefits: real-world applications, counter excessive screen time, and performance transfer. Beyond vision. NeuroTracker is a visual exercise, yet vision involves a lot more than just what you see. Vision also requires the brain to process the incoming images to make meaningful interpretations. NeuroTracker is designed to stimulate these mental resources, enabling training effects to go beyond vision. Studies have shown that training on NeuroTracker provided sustained improvements in activity in the frontal regions of the brain, which deal with abilities like decision-making, awareness, problem-solving, and planning. Furthermore, a range of peer-reviewed studies have demonstrated that as little as 72 minutes of NeuroTracker training transfers to measurable gains in high-level mental abilities, including executive functions, working memory, attention, and processing speed. These are abilities needed in human performance, allowing us to concentrate and focus on what we need to, when we need to. Who uses NeuroTracker? NeuroTracker provides top-down benefits that improve human performance. Used in over 1,000 plus performance and wellness centers worldwide, here are some of the areas impacted by the technology. Top sports teams in the NFL, NHL, NBA, and EPL, as well as Olympic athletes, train with NeuroTracker to improve their situational awareness and decision-making skills. Yet it doesn't stop there. Many other high-performance groups use the technology for similar benefits, including U.S. and Canadian Special Forces, the U.S. Air Force, NASA, as well as law enforcement agencies. Just like athletes, individuals working in the business world benefit from enhanced attention. Whether used by financial traders seeking to improve decision-making or by organizations looking to boost employee wellness, NeuroTracker is finding a home in workplaces all over the world. In schools around the globe, NeuroTracker has been applied to improve academic outcomes. This extends to students with learning difficulties who use the technology to hone their attention in the classroom. Many clinicians and neurovision specialists use NeuroTracker to help people with deficiencies, either to accelerate their recovery from injury or to raise their abilities to deal with everyday needs. People continue to find new and exciting applications for NeuroTracker, whether it be improving the quality of life for the elderly, to assess driving safety, to predict injury risk, evaluate surgery skills, or measure jet pilot performance in live pilots. In summary, NeuroTracker has a wide range of applications, including elite performance, business world, education, recovery, and many more. Training evolution. Everyone's mind is different. For this reason, NeuroTracker adapts to each user by automatically adjusting the difficulty. This is done through an adaptive algorithm that modifies the training speed, trial duration, and the amount of targets to track. As you improve, the system continues to fine-tune the difficulty to keep you in the Goldilocks zone for training. But NeuroTracker training doesn't stop there. Once you reach an advanced level, it's then possible to combine NeuroTracker training with a dual task. A dual task involves completing a second skill, all while maintaining focus on the NeuroTracker exercise. Not only does this make the NeuroTracker task more challenging, as you have to distribute your focus even further, but it also helps you practice relevant skills while pushing your attention to the limit. This combination allows NeuroTracker training to adapt to your training objectives and evolve over time. There is no limit to how you use NeuroTracker to train.
In this first module, we are going to introduce the evolution of NeuroTracker technology from the science that started out within the lab to the application that is used at the highest levels of human performance. In particular, we'll cover the team behind the technology and those who have adopted it. We'll provide you with a global overview of the company itself and distinguished clients to help you describe the origins of the software and early adopters who put NeuroTracker on the map. At the end of this module, you will have a good perspective of where NeuroTracker has come from and where it is going. NeuroTracker technologies have evolved out of a pure science approach that was developed from over 2 decades of research by neuroscience professor Jocelyn Faubert. Professor Faubert has been deemed to be the world's preeminent expert on perceptual cognitive science and is NeuroTracker's chief science officer and director of the Faubert Lab at the University of Montreal. Interestingly, our very first partnership in the field began in 2009 with Manchester United, who set up 2 dedicated 3D projector rooms to train all the professional players in the club. In close collaboration with the club's doctor, head of sports science, and their strength and conditioning coach, cognitive profiling was initially done with elevated baselines and used for return-to-play assessments in the event of injury. Despite changing management several times, the club has continued to use NeuroTracker and has expanded its use to their youth academy. NeuroTracker is a privately owned neurotechnology company based in Montreal, Canada that specializes in measuring and improving cognitive function for human performance and wellness. Although there are other technologies in development, the company's flagship product is likewise called NeuroTracker, which primarily trains awareness and focus. With partners and clients worldwide, NeuroTracker is being used by thousands of athletes, students, employees, soldiers, and active aging individuals in more than 800 human performance and wellness centers. NeuroTracker is partnered with the Faubert Lab, which is where it all began. Professor Faubert leads a strong team of 30 postgraduate neuroscientists, engineers, and physicists dedicated to research on human performance, measurement, and enhancement. The lab's research mainly covers visual perception and perceptual cognitive training, multisensory function, dynamic scenes and driving, as well as motion perception and postural stability. By using state-of-the-art tools such as biofeedback, eye tracking, and virtual reality technology, the team is able to understand and validate NeuroTracker in various populations and fields of human performance. Countless studies from the lab have been published in high-impact journals such as Nature Scientific Reports, Frontiers, and PLOS ONE. You may frequently hear the NeuroTracker team refer to the ARC. To encourage researchers around the world to validate NeuroTracker for specific practical applications, the Faubert Applied Research Center, or the ARC, was established as a non-profit research center dedicated to studying and furthering cognitive human performance potential. The center represents a close collaboration between NeuroTracker and the Faubert Lab with the aim of providing scientific support and consultancy to specialist researchers in any field of human performance. ARC research collaborations include ongoing studies with Rockwell Collins, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Montreal Impact Academy, the Christie Laboratory, the Perceptual Neuroscience Laboratory for Autism and Development, and a wide range of university labs and research centers. Though NeuroTracker started out using a dedicated room with 3D projectors, it is now also used with 3D TVs, head-mounted displays or VR headsets, and on personal computers using Anaglyph 3D. As technology is changing quickly, so too are the ways in which NeuroTracker can be deployed. For example, development has already started with augmented reality devices like the HoloLens 2. The software is also changing. While NeuroTracker used to be Windows only, it can now be deployed through the web and is being adapted to a new application platform called Unity 3D. This will allow much more advanced ways to train, including virtual scenes for training specific situational awareness skills, as well as integration with biofeedback and neurofeedback technologies. There are certainly exciting times ahead in the evolution of NeuroTracker technology. We are now going to discuss the basics for starting your users on their training program. Before we move into Module 4, it's recommended that you also take the time to familiarize yourself with the system and the session types available to you. The resource manual that educates on all the necessary technical tips and explains the session types in detail is a great place to start. The first step to getting someone started on NeuroTracker is to establish their baseline. While it of course depends on the capabilities of the user, if you want to get the most grounded scientific assessment, start with the session core at 4 targets and 8 seconds tracking duration. To achieve a full baseline assessment, the user must complete 3 core sessions. This provides an initial baseline, which is an assessment of a user's pre-existing cognitive status. The 3 sessions can be done back-to-back. If there is space to dedicate 15 to 20 minutes of your first evaluation to NeuroTracker, we recommend this as a great place to start. If you don't have 20 minutes to do a baseline evaluation, or if the individual is not capable of doing it back-to-back sessions, it's all right. As long as you stay consistent, you can define your own assessment protocol. You may decide to complete the baseline over a number of days, but there are a couple things to note first. Scores can vary from each day based on many factors such as levels of fatigue, physical activity, time of day, and so on. Additionally, as sleep helps to consolidate learning, there will likely be some learning effects when doing the first 3 sessions on different days. This means that the initial baseline will probably be slightly higher compared to doing them back-to-back. Lastly, keep in mind as well that many of the other modes do not unlock until 3 core sessions have been completed. When you are deciding on the number of targets that will be best suited for the user, there is room for flexibility. In general, scores between 0.7 and 2.0 will provide benefits within the optimal range. Lower than 0.7 means less targets is probably more suitable, and higher than 2.0 means the user is ready to step up, unless of course they are already at 4 targets. If you want to use a more fine-grained approach, then you can also compare scores directly. As a general rule of thumb, normative data shows that when the number of targets increases by 1, on average the speed threshold score will drop by around 33%. For instance, if a user scores 1.5 at 3 targets but can manage 1.3 at 4 targets, then they will likely get more benefit from training at 4 targets because their selective and distributed attention is allowing them to perform the task efficiently. If you want to get a little more advanced, you can use this rule of thumb to profile a user by testing them at 2, 3, and 4 targets. If their scores differ significantly from the 33% decrease, it will represent specific strengths or weaknesses relative to the difference in number of targets. Also keep in mind that trial duration affects scores in a similar way. Longer means lower speeds. So for these types of comparisons, keep the duration at the same, such as set at 8 seconds. For frequency of training, we generally recommend that users train 2 to 3 times per week. However, it is the population being trained and goals of training that will determine the optimal frequency. For example, some military or elite populations will train 2 sessions a day, 5 days per week. Some sports teams will train 3 days per week for 2 sessions. Alternatively, populations with low attentional capacity may train only 1 session per visit with an average of 1 to 2 days per week. It is important to understand that the ideal training frequency may vary for each individual who is training on the system, for example, 2 to 3 times per week. Then, there is an optimal training frequency that you will be able to determine based on the population you are working with. For example, young children with learning difficulties are likely to find 3 sessions in a row much more challenging than adult athletes. Training more intensively is recommended in the first 15 sessions because the strong learning effects will transfer to real-world performance. For number of sessions per day or per visit, 3 is considered the recommended upper limit. 3 sessions is not a hard limit, and doing more than 3 sessions will still provide benefits. However, doing more than 3 sessions per day will yield less benefit per session. This is because distributing training in between sleep allows the brain to adapt to the training effects more efficiently. When you were first exposed to NeuroTracker, you may have seen some impressive and exciting videos of athletes or individuals completing dual tasks and sport-specific skills while completing a NeuroTracker session. While this generates a lot of interest for users, it's important to help them understand both the added value and significant importance of task consolidation prior to dual task training. We are all familiar with the phrase, "you need to learn how to walk before you can run." The NeuroTracker task is complex and as such requires significant learning prior to adding an increased level of difficulty to the training. Studies have shown that consolidation training effectively prepares the brain for learning, and without it, training effectiveness will be lowered, with reduced speed thresholds and learning rates. Now that we've laid the framework for session parameters and establishing the baseline, it's time to break down the consolidation phase of training. To structure the consolidation phase, there is a recommended protocol that has room for modifications based on your assessment of the attentional needs of the individual. As previously discussed, we recommend 3 core sessions. That leaves 12 remaining sessions to be completed in a seated position. During this period of training, there is some freedom in the types of sessions that you can do other than core. However, we typically recommend core for the most part, which is the standard session in terms of scientific measurement. It is particularly important during the consolidation phase because this yields what we call a learning curve, which is the rate at which speed thresholds improve during the most rapid learning phase. This valuable data can be used as a reference to judge a person's functional neuroplasticity, which is a behavioral measure of brain adaptivity, as well as how a person's plasticity may improve over time. As we will cover in the science section of Module 6, NeuroTracker has revealed how this measure of plasticity can vary dramatically between different populations. In research, the standard analysis of a user's learning rate is based on the first 15 sessions. As we mentioned, sessions 1 to 3 provide an initial baseline, and similarly so, sessions 13 to 15 provide a reference for an elevated baseline. If you are working with low-functioning populations, it's important to compare an elevated baseline at sessions 13 to 15 using core for a universal reference of elevated baseline, and it's a good idea to also do the same at sessions 28 to 30. This is because consolidation of the task will typically take longer in low-functioning populations, so this will provide a fuller picture of the user's learning curve. These baselines can be compared directly for a universal evaluation of learning rate. For example, if a user improves from 1.0 to 1.5, their learning rate would be an improvement of 50%. Interestingly, from a neuroplasticity perspective, it is relevant to compare the learning rate between individuals who have very different scores. This is because it represents a relative change in brain function. In other words, even at very high or very low speeds, NeuroTracker speed thresholds represent an equal level of difficulty for each person. You can use a range of different session types in your NeuroTracker programs or assign some of the default programs already developed by the NeuroTracker team. We will not go into the specifics of different sessions in this course, but in essence, they revolve around the same methodology as core, with some key differences that change an aspect of the task. Choosing one over the other is not right or wrong, so it's encouraged that you make use of them and become familiar with each one and where it might lend value. For example, they may involve having to select targets in a special order to increase working memory and selective attention demands. Or the speed may fluctuate unpredictably while the balls are actually moving in order to increase dynamic attention load. The goal of using different session types is to provide variation to a training program and to be able to identify any specific cognitive weaknesses and then train them up. Regardless of what combination of sessions are used, it's really important to include at least one standard core session every 5 sessions to make sure that a scientific baseline measure can be maintained throughout any program. Also, some types of sessions rely on an up-to-date core baseline in order to accurately set the task at a user's threshold. Before we get started with this second module, we want to remind you about the product-based tutorials and support documents for the technical aspects of the system, as well as the requirements for getting up and running. If you have not already viewed these materials, please do so before continuing on with this course. Now that we've had the opportunity to educate on and provide some context to the background and history of NeuroTracker as a company, it's time to dive into the unique training components that are important for fully understanding the system. This module will teach you about the various aspects of training and how they translate into the strengthening of attention, working memory, and executive functions. While the task itself may seem relatively simple, it has been carefully designed to promote both the efficient and effective training of your cognitive systems. The core session is the mode that is the most validated in our research studies. The concept is simple and the results are clear. Each core session takes an average of 6 minutes. It consists of 20 trials within each session, and each trial is essentially a mini test. The basic task for each trial is to target, track, and identify between 1 to 4 targets out of the 8 total. The goal of the program is to track the targets as they move in a 3D space and ignore the distractors for a specific duration of time. When the balls stop moving, you have to identify the targets. While it may come across as being simplistic, this task can get very difficult very quickly. Let's break down what's happening during a trial. As mentioned earlier, each session contains 20 trials. The dots on the screen show you how many trials you've completed so far. Every time you correctly identify all targets, you will see a star appear instead of the dot, as well as a positive feedback sound. Whenever you don't identify all targets correctly, you'll see a dash instead of a star and hear a negative feedback sound. During a trial, there are many cognitive and visual perception systems being elicited in order to complete the task. There are 4 key aspects of the system that make the NeuroTracker unique for both assessment and training purposes, and they are critical to understanding the full application of the tool. They are as follows: wide field of view, stereoscopic 3D, multifocal training, and adaptive speed thresholds. NeuroTracker uses a wide field of view to place demands on peripheral vision systems, stimulating larger visual networks in the brain. When you are educating a user about the peripheral vision aspect of NeuroTracker training, it's important that they know how much they use this form of visual processing during their day-to-day life, sport, and profession. The what-where model of visual processing refers to our central and peripheral vision. The what component refers to foveal visual processing, which delivers information that is detail-oriented and for identification. The where component refers to the portion of vision associated with our spatial awareness and peripheral vision. This type of visual processing is pre-conscious and delivers information about location, motion, balance, and posture. It organizes our information with our proprioceptive and vestibular systems before being sent to the cortex for higher-order cognitive functions. Our peripheral processing occupies the majority of our visual field, as foveal vision accounts for roughly 5 degrees of central vision. This highlights the incredible importance of our peripheral vision in order to be functional in driving, navigating new environments, and for reaching the maximum of our human potential. As you will notice, there is a dot in the middle of the NeuroTracker cave. It is there to provide the user with a visual anchor to centralize eye focus. This is referred to as visual pivot. This helps the user spread their attention to targets and avoid making the mistake of focusing on a single target. Using the visual pivot encourages use of peripheral vision while performing a task. It is strongly recommended that users are instructed to use the visual pivot so that they can effectively distribute their attention for efficient learning. When not using visual pivot, users will have an intuitive tendency to foveally track certain targets at particular moments, impairing their ability to track multiple objects and gain the associated training benefits. This means that they may try to use saccadic eye control or pursuit rather than in peripheral awareness. Technically speaking, NeuroTracker uses binocular stereoscopy. This essentially means that each eye sees a different viewpoint, and this difference is used by the brain as a powerful way to judge the depth of objects in the environment. 3D perception is broader than this, as depth can also be judged by other visual cues such as size or tonal perspective, and as well as from previous knowledge. In this sense, whenever NeuroTracker is in 2D, it is still training some 3D systems. However, research shows that Stereo 3D specifically provides a critical training advantage. Results have shown that users can track at higher speed thresholds when perceiving 3D. This is because they can use a greater range of visual information and activate higher order visual processes in the brain. For NeuroTracker, you can use the term stereo for 3D and non-stereo for 2D, but now that you know what we are referring to, we will keep things simple by referring to just 3D and 2D. 3D training is fundamental because we operate in a three-dimensional world. Training with NeuroTracker in 3D immerses the user by simulating visual scenes with stereo perception. The goal of training is to activate systems that are used in real-world human performance. Having the users trained in a 3D environment is critical for task effectiveness. The next component of the NeuroTracker system is multiple object tracking. Tracking multiple targets at the same time generates scene complexity and engages multifocal attention. A key sub-feature of NeuroTracker is that the balls frequently cross over and collide off. This presents an additional challenge of predicting movement trajectories as well as eliciting bursts of working memory when the balls disappear due to occlusions. Because of these interactions, each tracked target is essentially a separate attentional task for your brain. The overall effect is that multiple object tracking heightens your ability to attend to many items at a given moment, allowing you to efficiently divide your mental resources across several different streams of attention. The 3D multiple object tracking paradigm also trains biological motion perception, which is our perception of human motion and movement. Our understanding of limb movement patterns, such as walking or running, as well as the direction of the motion itself, is critical for safely navigating a busy environment or entering a crosswalk. Biological motion perception also includes our ability to predict the actions and intentions of an individual, as well as interpret communication through body language. As you can imagine, this type of visual perception is critical for achieving elite human performance. During the explanation of the NeuroTracker session, we noted that trials will be marked as failures or successes on a screen. What's important to note is that the level of difficulty throughout the session is continually adapting and changing to be more or less difficult based on the results from the trials. NeuroTracker uses a patented speed adjustment algorithm to uniquely optimize difficulty to each person's needs for every session. What does this mean? When a user correctly identifies all the targets on a trial, the speed of the balls in the subsequent trial will increase, and when a user does not correctly identify all the targets, the speed of the balls will decrease. The degree of these changes in speed will depend on 4 factors: the user's current baseline, the speed of the current trial in the session, performance on previous trials in the session, and the stage the trial is at in the session overall. Because of these factors, it's essentially a statistical certainty that no 2 NeuroTracker sessions are ever exactly the same. One thing to keep in mind with the core session is that the user can only get a trial correct or incorrect. There are no partial marks, meaning that even if an individual got 3 out of 4 targets right, the speed adjustments do not take it into consideration. It also does not count if the user chooses the wrong targets within close proximity of correct targets. As the trial continues within a session, the fluctuations of speed between the trials will typically decrease. In essence, NeuroTracker is continually trying to test, find, and set the ideal speed for optimal cognitive stimulation for the user's current mental state. Within a few trials, the task will usually be within the Goldilocks zone in terms of encouraging learning and improvement. At the end of the session, there will be speed threshold score for the performance of the user, which is the result of the overall session. The NeuroTracker software makes the speed threshold calculation based off the speed at which a user makes a certain number of both fails and successes throughout a session. Typically, these values are selected in the second half of a session when speed adjustments have narrowed in very closely to the user's limits. The score at the very end of the session is the speed at which the user was able to track all targets correctly around 50% of the time. This is a unique NeuroTracker metric that can be used to assess the person's cognitive capacity on day 1, as well as improvements from training over time. And though some clients also like to microanalyze performance on individual trials, it's essentially the speed threshold score which provides the most important measure based on science. Confidence of users is an important consideration when you are evaluating a training program. Even though NeuroTracker is a form of cognitive training, the user's psychological state of mind can be observed while performing a session. As you are supervising a session, it's important to observe patterns of body language, emotional reactions, breathing rate, verbal responses, and so on, particularly when users make errors. These give insights into an individual's mindset under mental pressure. Changes in these patterns over time can also become important indicators for improvements in mindset and self-control. For instance, it's common for individuals with ADHD to fidget and swing their legs while they sit on a stool or to look away from the screen during tracking. It's been observed by clinicians that this habit noticeably reduces with training over time. It's recommended that you take notes between sessions so that these traits can be monitored throughout the program. It's valuable to be able to look back on progress and see how behaviors have changed throughout training that you may otherwise not pick up on without documentation. In addition, pay attention if any of these behaviors change when doing NeuroTracker sessions back to back. This can provide insight as to whether a particular mindset is associated more with pre-existing factors or by the cognitive load induced with NeuroTracker. In some cases, NeuroTracker training itself can be a fast and effective way to inhibit negative psychological states. If so, it can become a powerful tool to be utilized in daily life. For example, an athlete may want to perform a session before competition to control their mental state. Some professional NeuroTracker trainers use this approach by doing their NeuroTracker with their clients before they engage in any other types of training. Feedback is important and sometimes we underestimate its value. Motivation is the key factor here. This also ties into the goals you set with users at the outset of their training program. It's important that users know you are monitoring their progress and reporting on how they are doing in the short and long run. The most critical point of feedback is the first session result, particularly if a user feels or knows that their score is low. Two key things to take into note here are that 1, the main goal is to see improvement over time, and the first score does not represent their actual potential. 2, someone starting off at a low level has a lot more to gain from the benefits of NeuroTracker, because the chances are that NeuroTracker can greatly improve their mental focus and awareness. For example, with a soccer athlete, this can be easily translated into imagine being able to be a lot more aware of your passing options when you have the ball. A simple but powerful way to give ongoing feedback is to frequently compare session results and current baseline to their initial baseline, to emphasize how far they've come. Even if there is only a 20% improvement, ask them to imagine how difficult it felt when they started and how slow those initial speeds seem now. Also emphasize that this is not a practice or technique related effect, it's because their mental muscle has literally improved. The user also has to believe that what they are doing will help them with real-world abilities. The transferability of training is key. For this reason, regularly ask about any changes your users notice and evaluate this in the context of the training data and your observations. Naturally, it's best to try to frame things in a positive light. For example, if a session goes badly, it may give insight into what's going on in the user's life, including levels of stress or poor sleep. It's also useful to remind users that if a session score is low, they will still get benefits from the training. It may simply be more difficult than normal on that particular day. It's especially important to account for lower scores when attempting new dual tasks or more difficult session settings. You can also ask the athlete to do an auto-evaluation and feedback. Often, they see themselves worse than they actually are, or see their performance in an overly negative way. A more structured review will help them frame things in a longer-term perspective, as well as to appreciate progress over time. Rather than dwell on individual session scores, use objective numbers and facts to motivate your athlete. You can even suggest homework to develop better techniques. This could be something as simple as breathing exercises or to keep a food or sleep diary to share with you. Before talking about results, keep in mind that the speed threshold score evaluates how your brain can process information in that specific moment of time. The fact that you have consistent results and that you improve shows that your attention is increasing to this level. We can't base a reliable assessment on a single session. The time of day, sickness, a bad night of sleep, medications, fatigue, stress, and so on can all be various factors that can have an impact on the score. Try to base the assessment off the average of the last 3 sessions. It's for these reasons that it's important that you ask specific questions before a training session, and this is particularly important on the day you complete baseline testing. Hours of sleep, fatigue, and medication intake are important factors to consider in order to know if we can rely on these scores for baseline references. The most important score comparison is always core initial baseline and current baseline, as these provide standardized measures. References to population-specific norms can be used to evaluate a user's general level, particularly when completing a baseline of 4 targets 8 seconds. You can find a tool for this in your user manual. However, the most important reference is to review the user's own learning rate. For instance, a user may have normal levels starting off, but if they do not improve at all with training, this may indicate other underlying cognitive issues or some type of brain-related impairment. One factor to take into account here is the concept of implicit learning. For instance, it has been observed that factors inhibiting cognitive functions can keep NeuroTracker scores low over time, yet when there is recovery, scores can boost up into normal range. This means that even though scores do not reflect it at the time, learning can still be happening. What we found over the years is that no matter the profession or the area of implementation, each professional puts their own spin on what they consider best practice for NeuroTracker use, and no two are the same. While it's helpful to have a guide in the beginning, this module will help you combine ideas and strategies with your own clinical expertise for maximizing the various ways the system can be implemented. During the base certification, we discussed the importance of ongoing feedback, coaching, and observing users with training. This is a very important component to be aware of, and it's recommended that you review that content if you haven't already. To further elaborate on these concepts, we're going to provide feedback that we've received from our key opinion leaders over the years. First, many of our key opinion leaders see the value of having open communication with clients before starting training. It helps you get an understanding of how to structure the program and determine what their needs are. For example, in a sports performance setting, you could ask the following questions before training. Are you aware of your cognitive strengths and weaknesses? Do you want to focus on your strength or your weakness? What are your short-term and long-term goals for performance training and in your sport or profession? How much time do you have to reach this new level? Do you need to improve motor skills? Are there any specific skills or tasks that you would like to improve at? These types of questions will help determine the best protocol for your users on their path to improvement. Once you've established your training objectives, you can plan and start your protocol. Additionally, we asked some of our KOLs what's the best way to prepare a new user for NeuroTracker training. The message was consistent across responses, which was, don't forget the importance of properly introducing NeuroTracker to a new user for maintaining engagement throughout training. Education in early phases is critical. Remember that NeuroTracker will probably seem like a strange and abstract training protocol. Additionally, if the participant doesn't really understand what they are doing, it'll affect their baseline score. So before demoing a session, you should always introduce key NeuroTracker concepts, including why it's a unique neuroscience tool, why the 3D component of training is important, what it's used for, who uses it and what the key benefits will be for them, and what a training program involves, including frequency and time commitment. This gives the user a good idea of what the training will entail as well as the benefits of being compliant. Before diving deep into the training, many of our KOLs have discussed the value of a few practice trials before getting started as well. Using the spacebar to pause the program while you speak about the concepts helps explain the task in small doses and allows you to take time to answer questions. A few items and instructions to highlight while going through the demo are: 1. Keep focused on the center dot. We want you to be training peripheral vision. 2. Spread attention to the highlighted balls, which is particularly important during indexing. 3. Keep the targets clearly in mind once they move within the 3D space. You're practicing multiple object tracking. 4. Identify the targets of each ball that you've tracked. If you lost a target and you're not confident in the one you followed, take a shot at your best guess. And 5. Be ready for the speeds to change each trial. The system is adaptive and will adjust based on your performance. We've also asked our key opinion leaders what's an important piece of advice you can give other clinicians using NeuroTracker. Dr. Keith Smithson, who's an optometrist specializing in pediatrics and sports vision, said, make use of both the assessment and rehabilitative components of NeuroTracker training. When an athlete first comes to our office, we conduct a comprehensive sports vision evaluation. NeuroTracker is used as a pre- and post-performance baseline for all athletes, which is then incorporated into their sports vision training program. We use their core performance on a monthly basis as a way to evaluate if the vision therapy is benefiting the patient. Carol Leduc, osteopath. While doing NeuroTracker, some users need a coach to help guide them. Even athletes can benefit from this because they tend to have their own personal unique responses to their wins and losses. If they do well, then some will get so excited about their scores that they miss the next two, or reverse, where they get a few wrong and then they'll start to talk to themselves negatively. You really need to stop the program and coach them through the exercise. Dr. Charles Shidlovsky, optometrist and vision specialist. You have to start slowly and take a very individualized approach, using the right combination of therapies for a patient's specific needs. I use my 80% rule. Ensure that their training program is not too easy, but not too hard so that they remain engaged. Especially while working with low-functioning populations, we start with the core program to establish a cognitive baseline. From there, we gradually move on to more complex programs, but patients need to learn the fundamentals before introducing new session types. Maxime Chevrier, sports psychology consultant and vision specialist. NeuroTracker is the last line of defense. At the end, the results will give me the most information about my patient. You can pass other tests but fail NeuroTracker, whereas the other way around is really rare. It's also never going to be one protocol for everyone. You need to adapt your NeuroTracker protocol to the needs of your patient. Even though every session of NeuroTracker helps improve attention and awareness, we can enhance training effectiveness by having a good grasp of what the various sessions within the NeuroTracker system are. Although it's difficult to create one standard protocol for all users, core is and always will be the first session you use, and it will remain as the foundation throughout. From there, you have a lot of flexibility to be creative in adapting and creating customized programs that are unique and specific to the individual, as well as some feedback. Mick Clegg, former Manchester United coach. NeuroTracker can be built into coaching sessions in a few different ways. Firstly, it can be a mental warm-up, which helps because when athletes arrive to their session, they aren't always ready to focus properly on their training. Secondly, it fits in great when athletes need some short physical recovery. Instead of wasting time resting, we keep the performance conditioning going to get the most out of every minute. Lastly, doing NeuroTracker over time builds up their cognitive processing so we can achieve advanced training routines more quickly. For additional content and advice from expert users, don't forget to make use of our blog library and the Expert Corner for NeuroTracker implementation that we've received from our key opinion leaders over the years. First, many of our key opinion leaders see the value of having open communication with clients before starting training. It helps you get an understanding of how to structure the program and determine what their needs are. In the first two modules, we covered the background of NeuroTracker and its fundamental makeup. But the next question is, what does this all mean for enhancing cognitive abilities, and what impact does NeuroTracker training have on the brain? In this module, we will run through the effects from a top-down level so that you have an idea of how widely the benefits can apply to real-life needs. Within a single NeuroTracker trial, the user is selecting their attention to the highlighted targets. They are continuously prioritizing mental focus onto what's important, eliciting selective attention. Users must divide their attention as the balls move around the screen and bounce off each other and the cube. The environment is also not static and can be quite chaotic at higher speeds. This places demands on distributed attention. Users must also sustain their attention for up to 8 seconds while the balls are in movement. This requires hyperfocus for short bursts of time, stimulating sustained attention. Throughout their NeuroTracker training sessions, the user is developing their attention and working memory skills in many different ways. With time and practice, studies have shown that in addition to working memory and attention, measurable improvements are seen in executive functions, auditory processing capacity, and visual information processing speed. The importance and significance of attention and working memory in our ability to learn can often be overlooked. Before we move on, let's break down these concepts further. Working memory is a cognitive system controlled by executive function. It's critical for making sense of an event as it unfolds over time. Our ability to be creative in our thoughts and use cognitive reasoning depends on working memory. It allows us to hold information in our mind and manipulate it, and to see connections between seemingly unrelated things. Our working memory can be compared to the interactive whiteboard of the brain, which is the space where we can process all of our ideas. It doesn't matter how intelligent someone is, attention is a limited resource. Selective attention is the ability to focus on what's important and shut out distractions. In a world where we are constantly tuned in to various pieces of technology, the ability to selectively attend to a task can be increasingly challenging. NeuroTracker drills selective attention over and over so that the act of channeling focus becomes an automatic discipline. In each 6-minute session, the user must prioritize targets, remember them, track them, disentangle them from the decoys, and select them 20 times in a row. Distributed attention is what's commonly confused as multitasking. Based on selection, distributed attention is the ability to divide attention across several different processes at the same time and stay on top of all of them. The multiple object tracking of NeuroTracker requires the user to distribute their attention between the targets while independently following each target's path. The targets cross over and collide unpredictably. For the brain, this is 3 to 4 independent processes happening at once with no room for error. In day-to-day life, distributed attention is what allows us to attend to multiple streams of information at one time. Dynamic attention is the ability to maintain attention when situations are moving or changing rapidly. For example, think about when you are engaging in a group conversation. It is a river of complex communication exchanges, interpreting tones and ideas, reading emotional cues through body language and facial expressions. Keeping up with the evolving content of the conversation and responding on time is a major test of our working memory and alertness. Individuals who excel at dynamic attention are able to stay aware even in the chaos and feel in control. Sustained attention is what people relate to the most easily, the ability to hold your focus and concentrate fluidly without attention gaps. Though the NeuroTracker task is seemingly abstract, the benefits of training attention and cognition in this way relate to real-life environments. Let's take the visual scene from a soccer game as an example. Soccer players have to select their attention to the ball as well as all the areas where the action is happening. They must also distribute their attention to their opponents, to their teammates, as well as to the referee. And finally, they must also sustain their attention throughout bursts of dynamic and complex play. These are cognitive skills which are trained at high level with NeuroTracker. The important takeaway is that NeuroTracker training is robust enough to enhance a wide range of high-level cognitive functions. These are known to be important in almost all areas of human performance and wellness. This represents a top-down training effect, which is why the benefits of NeuroTracker are generally useful to people across a diverse range of real-world scenarios. Once your user has successfully completed 15 to 30 core sitting sessions and has shown improvement, a recommended next step is to start incorporating dual tasks, also known as plus skills. This is where things can get quite interesting. One of the purposes of dual task training is to increase the cognitive load capacity of the individual. We want the user to be performing a task that is pushing the limits of their attention and cognitive systems in a way that is representative of real-world scenarios. This is achieved by progressively adding skills in a controlled manner. Simply adding a cognitive load to the user while performing NeuroTracker will significantly increase the cognitive load of a training session. For example, as soon as a user stands up and tries to do NeuroTracker, their speed threshold scores will usually decrease. We don't normally assume that a standing requires a cognitive load, however, standing without falling over requires brain function. Allocating resources to basic balance systems therefore influences your attention levels. As we will soon discuss, this is why dual task training always starts with the basics first. The addition of any kind of physical task will add loads on cognitive processes involved with proprioception. As you know, proprioception is our ability to sense position, motion, and equilibrium within your body. Surprisingly, a study with professional athletes showed that if standing is added before the consolidation phase, it lowers both speed thresholds and learning rate. Dual tasks can be progressively implemented by adding new types of physical or cognitive loads to NeuroTracker sessions, working from simple to increasingly complex over time. The goal is to enhance high-level cognitive abilities which prepare the brain to be increasingly adaptable to new learning demands. This process conditions users to be able to perform at optimal levels on both tasks, and it can facilitate the conditioning of overall performance abilities to extremely high levels. Clinicians and trainers should make the final decision on recommending specific dual tasks. The most important guideline to remember is simple to complex. Users who attempt to add highly complex skills on top of NeuroTracker training before mastering simpler skills like standing and balance will learn less efficiently. With your NeuroTracker system, you'll have access to a dual task library that has a lot of variety for structuring your program. We will rate the level of difficulty according to our guidelines, but the following will provide you with a structure of how a program should typically be built. Please note that levels of difficulty will be based on the skills of the user as well. With each skill, we are not necessarily looking for a specific number of reps, but more of a passive movement, at an intensity you feel is appropriate for the individual. Standing is the first recommended skill, and you should do several sessions in this stance before you move on. Balance is the second recommended skill. Balance for beginners can mean simply standing on one foot, for example, alternating left-right on each trial. Advanced users can employ a balance beam, balance board, or Bosu ball after moving on from the beginner balance tasks. Strength and physical tasks are next in the progression. Consider adding repetitions of bodyweight exercises such as the lunge or squat during the trial. Cardio training can also be incorporated. Sport-specific skills are recommended for athletes after they have graduated from strength and balance. We strongly recommend choosing skills that can be done without looking or using peripheral vision. Dribbling the basketball is a classic example. While we are providing physical examples here, any kind of task that is practically compatible can be used effectively. For example, for a school child, it could be something as simple as solving arithmetic or spelling tests. These will still add significant cognitive load to a training session. For someone who has a challenging work environment, you can move the NeuroTracker training to an area of your clinic or training center that has more noise or distractions. Physical tasks are one type of skill you can work with, but the underlying principle is that we are increasing the cognitive load to meet the demands of the environment. Once you apply this concept, you can become really creative with your training program. Don't forget that as you are progressing through dual task training, that it is important to ensure that every fifth session is completed as core in a regular seated position. This provides an updated reference to compare against the baseline. As a general guide though, if a plus skill session results in a score that is less than 50% of their current core baseline, then it is too difficult for efficient learning. A similar but easier skill should be used in its place, then come back to the previous skill once it is mastered. A significant improvement will likely be seen. Pay attention to what their current baseline is before they start a new skill. It is expected that you will see a drop, but then it should start to increase. Once you see their scores return to the range they were prior to starting the new skill, it is an indication that it is time to progress to something more complex. You can continue to do this as you progress their training. So you've now made it through the introductory course for NeuroTracker. To finish up this course, we'll summarize some key points on why NeuroTracker can deliver powerful benefits. First, we discuss the rapid learning effects of NeuroTracker training. Global data shows that users improve significantly at NeuroTracker within 2 to 3 hours of distributed training. Research shows that these gains lead to wide transfer effects for improvements in many high-level cognitive functions and real-world performance. This is key for efficiency of time because it can take upwards of 30 hours on other cognitive training platforms to see effects of training. NeuroTracker is also effective across different populations. While we frequently talk about NeuroTracker in relation to the elite performers, it is also an effective tool in very low-functioning individuals. NeuroTracker data is used in many scientific domains to assess human performance and provides unique performance metrics via constantly evolving applications. As we discussed in a review of the literature, NeuroTracker is a rapidly growing movement with new scientific methodologies and applications being evolved in specific areas of human performance. NeuroTracker is also a simple yet dynamic, non-contextualized task. It's simple to understand, can be understood by children as young as 5 and the elderly as old as 90. The relevance of the task spans across different age groups, populations, and expertise. This makes training accessible to almost any individual. Not only is the task easy to demonstrate and begin using, the bite-sized sessions make training adaptable to any program. Whether you're using NeuroTracker on the go or using it as an in-center system, each NeuroTracker session takes only 5 to 6 minutes to complete. This allows users to be hyper-focused without experiencing cognitive fatigue. This also allows trainers and clinicians to assess their users quickly and to incorporate NeuroTracker easily into their existing protocols. Not only is NeuroTracker simple and easy to understand, it's also very adaptable to the needs of a user. From the outset, NeuroTracker is able to adjust difficulty quickly and automatically with powerful sensitivity and accuracy. Whether you're using the system with a 3D TV, a head-mounted display, or on your laptop, trainers can adapt the environment or the task to increase or decrease the difficulty of the training. With NeuroTracker, the trainer has the ability to adjust different parameters including number of targets, duration, feedback, and indexing. This addition allows for training or assessment to be precisely adapted to each user's specific needs. NeuroTracker on its own has massive benefits, but as soon as your user completes the consolidation phase, complementing the training with other technologies as well as integrating it with other protocols can take things to a whole new level. A good example of this can be seen with our partners who use NeuroTracker for perceptual, cognitive, and visual training while using FitLight to train reaction skills. Integrating the two technologies into one training program can elevate the protocol and keep the athlete engaged in the training. Jumping into more advanced training takes time, so just make sure to understand your user's needs and overall NeuroTracker level before graduating them onto more integrative training. Other complementary technologies can include Synaptic Sensory Station, Right Eye, and Dynavision to name a few.